"You're either a team player or you're gone," Robert Lang said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. He slid the termination papers across the polished oak table with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your choice, Elena." I stared at the document bearing my name, Elena Morales, Senior Accountant, Fairview Holdings, and felt a strange calm wash over me. 6 years of dedicated service, countless late nights, and this was how it ended. Being forced to choose between my integrity and my livelihood. "I won't falsify financial statements for the audit," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Not for you, not for anyone." Robert's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "Then I believe we're done here." Without another word, I signed the termination papers. No arguments, no pleas, no emotional outbursts. I simply picked up my pen and signed away 6 years of my career at Fairview Holdings, a mid-sized real estate investment firm in Hartford, Connecticut, that I had helped build into a respected name in the industry. As security escorted me to clear out my desk, I felt the eyes of my colleagues following me through the open plan office. Some looked away, too uncomfortable to witness my disgrace. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. My assistant, Vanessa, approached with tears in her eyes, but security stepped between us. "Personal items only," the guard instructed as I emptied my desk drawer. "Company laptops and phones stay." I nodded, carefully placing framed photos, my coffee mug, and a few books into a cardboard box. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment. For months, I had been documenting every questionable directive, archiving incriminating emails, and taking screenshots of Slack conversations where executives discussed massaging the numbers and creative accounting for the upcoming audit. At 39, I was too experienced to be naive. When the pressure to adjust financial records began 3 months ago, I knew exactly where it was heading. I had seen it before at other companies, the subtle hints evolving into direct demands, all leading to the same place: fraud. As I walked through the lobby for the last time, box in hand, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. My dark hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, my expression composed despite the turmoil within. I wasn't just leaving a job. I was standing at the precipice of a moral decision that would ripple through many lives, including my own. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would show Robert Lang and the entire executive team what happens when you fire the one person who knows where all the bodies are buried, the person who did things by the book, no exceptions. My condo in downtown Hartford had always been my sanctuary, but that night it felt more like a war room. Spread across my dining table were printed copies of emails, financial statements, and meeting notes, physical backups of the digital trail I had meticulously preserved over the past few months. I had always been the careful one, the meticulous record keeper. It was both my greatest professional strength and, according to my ex-husband Jason, the reason our marriage had failed 3 years ago. "You're too rigid," he had said during our last argument. "Life isn't a balance sheet, Elena." Perhaps he was right about life, but in accounting, precision was everything. And right now, precision was my only weapon. I pulled up the email I had drafted earlier that day, addressed to all 7 members of Fairview Holdings' board of directors. The message was simple and factual, with no emotional language or accusations. Just the truth, laid bare in black and white, with dozens of attachments proving systematic financial misrepresentation, ordered by Chief Financial Officer Robert Lang and supported by Chief Executive Officer Thomas Wilson. My finger hovered over the send button as doubt crept in. Was I really prepared for the fallout? Once I pressed send, there would be no going back. I would be branded a whistleblower, respected by some, reviled by others. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "They're saying you resigned because you couldn't handle the pressure. Lang already interviewed your replacement." That was all I needed. I hit send. Within minutes, my email was sitting in the inboxes of not only the board of directors, but also Fairview's external auditors and legal counsel. The truth was out, and now all I could do was wait. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the city lights. 6 years ago, I had joined Fairview Holdings with such optimism. The company had been smaller then, more focused on ethical investments in affordable housing developments. Over time, as profit margins became the only metric that mattered, something fundamental had changed. 3 months ago, when Robert first suggested adjusting our debt-to-equity ratios to attract a particular investor, I had expressed concern. He had laughed it off as standard industry practice. 2 months ago, when he instructed me to reclassify certain expenses to inflate our quarterly earnings report, I documented the conversation and quietly began gathering evidence. 1 month ago, when he ordered me to create a shell subsidiary to hide underperforming assets before the audit, I knew my days at Fairview were numbered. I just hadn't expected the end to come quite so abruptly. Looking out at the Hartford skyline, I wondered how many other companies were hiding similar secrets behind their gleaming windows, and how many other accountants were facing the same impossible choice I had faced today. The response was faster than I anticipated. By 8 a.m. the next morning, I had received calls from 3 board members, including Chairwoman Diana Frost, who had always struck me as the most ethically minded of the leadership team. "We've called an emergency board meeting for noon," she informed me, her voice grave. "The evidence you've provided is concerning, to say the least. Would you be willing to join us via conference call?" I agreed, spending the morning organizing my documentation and preparing my statement. At precisely noon, I connected to the call. "The board has reviewed your materials, Miss Morales," Diana began after introductions were complete. "We've also spoken with our legal counsel about next steps. But before we proceed, we'd like to hear directly from you about what transpired." For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through everything, from the first subtle suggestions to polish the numbers to the explicit demands to falsify data. I detailed Robert's growing pressure and eventual ultimatum that led to my termination. "And you have documentation for all of this?" asked board member Gregory Patel, his tone skeptical. "Every instance is documented with emails, meeting notes, or recorded conversations in accordance with Connecticut's one-party consent laws," I confirmed. "I've been in accounting for 17 years, Mr. Patel. I understand the importance of evidence." The silence that followed told me everything. They believed me. But more importantly, they knew I had them cornered. If they didn't act on this information, they would be complicit. "Thank you for your candor, Miss Morales," Diana finally said. "Please keep your phone nearby. Our legal team will be in touch." 3 hours later, I received an email notification for an urgent press release from Fairview Holdings. The statement announced the immediate suspension of Robert Lang and CEO Thomas Wilson, pending a full independent investigation into alleged financial improprieties. The company had also self-reported to the Securities and Exchange Commission and would be cooperating fully with any regulatory inquiries. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Vanessa. "The office is in chaos," she whispered. "Security just escorted Lang and Wilson out of the building. People are saying the feds might get involved." "Elena, what did you do?" "I told the truth," I said simply. That evening, I received a formal email from Diana Frost requesting an in-person meeting the following day. Part of me wondered if they were planning to silence me with a settlement offer and non-disclosure agreement, a common corporate strategy for managing whistleblowers. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. A former colleague who now worked at Veltrix Optics had sent me a message. "Heard what happened at Fairview. We're looking for a new finance director with strong ethics. Interested?" The message brought tears to my eyes. Tears of relief, validation, and perhaps a touch of pride. I had gambled my career on the belief that integrity would ultimately be valued. Now, it seemed the first evidence was appearing to support that belief. Still, as I drifted off to sleep, I knew this story was far from over. The real fallout was just beginning, and morning would bring new battles to face. The following morning, Fairview Holdings stock had dropped nearly 15% by the time I arrived for my meeting with Diana Frost. The lobby of the company's headquarters, normally bustling with activity, was eerily quiet except for a few reporters lingering outside, hoping to catch an insider for comment. Security brought me directly to the executive floor, the same floor I had been escorted from in disgrace just 2 days earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. Diana was waiting in the boardroom alongside 2 individuals she introduced as Terrence Walker from the firm's legal department and Josephine Alvarez, an attorney from an external law firm specializing in corporate compliance. "Thank you for coming, Elena," Diana began. "We've initiated a full-scale independent investigation, but the board felt it important to hear your perspective on how widespread these issues might be." "Before we begin," Josephine interjected, "I want to clarify that Miss Morales is here voluntarily and should be treated as a whistleblower protected under federal law, not as a hostile party." I appreciated the attorney's directness, though I suspected her concern was more about limiting Fairview's liability than protecting me. "Of course," Diana agreed smoothly. "Elena, we value your 18 years of experience in financial compliance and hope you can help us understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." 17 years, I corrected automatically. It was a small detail, but in my world, precision mattered. For the next hour, I walked them through the evolution of the accounting irregularities, how they had started small but grown increasingly brazen as external financial pressures mounted on the company. I explained how Robert had compartmentalized the deceptive practices, ensuring that different team members worked on isolated pieces so that no one besides him had the complete picture. No one except me, that is. As senior accountant, I was the nexus through which all financial information flowed. "How many others do you believe were knowingly involved?" Terrence asked, taking careful notes. "Based on direct evidence, I can only confirm Robert Lang and Thomas Wilson," I replied. "Several others may have suspected, but Robert was careful to maintain plausible deniability for most of the team." Diana leaned forward. "Elena, I'm going to be blunt. The board is prepared to offer you reinstatement with a substantial promotion and compensation increase. We need someone with your ethical standards and institutional knowledge to help us correct course." The offer caught me off guard. I had expected legal threats, or perhaps a severance package with strings attached. Not this. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure returning is the right move for either of us." Diana looked surprised. She clearly wasn't accustomed to having her offers rejected. "May I ask why?" "The compensation would be quite generous." "Because the problems at Fairview go deeper than Robert and Thomas," I said. "The board has received quarterly reports for years. You approved executive bonuses tied to financial metrics that, in retrospect, were clearly implausible. Either the board failed in its fiduciary duty of oversight, or some of you were aware and chose to look the other way." The room fell silent. Josephine shifted uncomfortably, while Terrence stopped writing entirely. "That's a serious allegation," Diana finally said, her voice tight. "It's an observation based on the financial data, which is my area of expertise," I replied. "And it's why I believe my credibility as a whistleblower would be compromised if I returned to Fairview's payroll." As the meeting concluded without resolution, I noticed a notification on my phone, an email from the Securities and Exchange Commission requesting an interview. The federal investigation was officially underway, and I had just declined the company's attempt to bring me back into the fold. Walking out of Fairview for what I now knew would be the last time, I felt lighter. The path ahead was uncertain, but at least it was my own. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a downtown cafe with Benjamin Harris, the investigative reporter whose coverage of the Fairview scandal had made national headlines. What had started as a local business story had expanded into a full-blown exposé on corporate fraud that had sent shockwaves through the real estate investment industry. "Just to confirm," Benjamin said, checking his notes, "you're comfortable with me quoting you directly on the timeline of events leading to your termination?" I nodded, scanning the latest draft of his article on his tablet. "Everything attributed to me is accurate. But remember our agreement. This interview is about corporate accountability, not personal vendettas." "Absolutely," he agreed, taking back the tablet. "Though readers love a personal angle. Any interest in sharing how it felt to watch Fairview's stock drop 30% since the scandal broke?" I sipped my coffee, considering my response carefully. "I take no pleasure in watching a company I helped build suffer, Benjamin. Many honest employees are now facing uncertainty because of decisions made by a few." He looked disappointed, but made a note. "Fair enough. What about the SEC investigation? Sources tell me you've had multiple interviews with federal regulators." "I can't comment on an ongoing investigation," I replied, the answer practiced and precise. Our conversation was interrupted by an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Elena Morales speaking," I said, excusing myself from the table. "Miss Morales, this is William Bennett, Chief Compliance Officer at Thornmere Financial." The name of one of Fairview's largest competitors immediately caught my attention. I was hoping we might meet to discuss an opportunity. I scheduled a meeting for the following day and returned to Benjamin, who was watching me with undisguised curiosity. "Another job offer?" he asked. "That's the third one I've seen you take since we sat down." It was true. In the week since the scandal broke, I had received inquiries from multiple companies seeking financial compliance leadership. My reputation as the whistleblower who took down Fairview's executive team had made me simultaneously radioactive and highly desirable, depending on a company's priorities. "Would you believe me if I said it was a cold call about my car's extended warranty?" I joked. Benjamin laughed. Not for a second. His expression turned more serious. "Elena, there's something you should know before this article goes to print. I've uncovered evidence suggesting that Fairview's fraudulent practices may have direct connections to Redwood Capital Partners." I felt my blood run cold. Redwood was one of the largest private equity firms in the Northeast, with tentacles reaching into dozens of companies across multiple industries. "What kind of connections?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Financial flows that don't make sense, overlapping board memberships, and remarkably similar accounting irregularities," he explained. "I think Fairview might be just the tip of the iceberg." If Benjamin was right, my actions had potentially uncovered something much bigger than one company's financial misdeeds. It also meant that some very powerful people might have reason to be concerned about what I knew, or what I might discover. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You've made your point. Walk away now if you know what's good for you." I showed the message to Benjamin, whose eyes widened. "Are you going to report this?" he asked. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to my attorney. "Already done." The warning only confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. I had stumbled onto something much larger than one CFO's attempt to cook the books. The question was, how deep did I want to dig? The offices of Thornmere Financial occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown tower with views of the Connecticut River. I was shown to a conference room where William Bennett waited alongside Thornmere's CEO, Victoria Larson, and a woman introduced as Imani Johnson, head of internal audit. "Thank you for coming, Miss Morales," Victoria began after pleasantries were exchanged. "I'll get straight to the point. We've been following the Fairview situation with great interest, and frankly, we're impressed by your integrity." William nodded in agreement. "In the current regulatory environment, companies like ours are under intense scrutiny. We need someone with both technical expertise and moral courage leading our compliance efforts. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Compliance Officer," Victoria continued. "The role would report directly to me, with full board access and a substantial budget for staffing your department as you see fit." The offer was unexpected. Not just a job, but a C-suite position with significantly more authority and compensation than I had ever had at Fairview. "That's very generous," I replied carefully. "May I ask what prompted such a substantial offer to someone you've just met?" Victoria and William exchanged glances. Honesty? Fear, Victoria admitted. Not of you, but of being the next Fairview. The regulatory landscape is changing, and we need someone who can ensure we're not just compliant on paper. Also, Imani added, speaking for the first time, I reviewed your work when we competed with Fairview on the Westridge Development Project last year. Your financial models were impeccable. Talent like yours is rare. Their transparency was refreshing, but something still felt off. The offer was too perfect, too quickly extended to someone at the center of an ongoing scandal. Before I consider your offer, I said, I need to ask a difficult question. What is Thornmere's relationship with Redwood Capital Partners? The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Victoria's smile faltered ever so slightly, while William's posture stiffened. They're a minority investor in some of our development projects, Victoria answered carefully. Why do you ask? Because I've received information suggesting Redwood may be linked to the same financial irregularities I uncovered at Fairview, I replied, watching their reactions closely. And I've recently received what could be interpreted as a threat warning me to stop investigating. Imani leaned forward, her expression grave. What kind of threat? I showed them the anonymous text message. This is concerning, William said after a moment, but I'm not sure what it has to do with our job offer. Everything, I countered. If I were to accept this position, I would need complete independence to investigate any potential issues, regardless of who they involve, including major investors. Victoria was quiet for a long moment before responding. Elena, let me be candid. We're offering you this position because we want to ensure Thornmere doesn't become the next financial scandal headline. If you have concerns about Redwood, that's something we should know about. Or, I suggested, you already know about Redwood's practices, and you're offering me this position to keep me close and controlled. The silence that followed was telling. I think we're done here, I said, gathering my belongings. Thank you for your time. As I walked toward the elevator, William caught up to me. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. We genuinely need someone like you. Then prove it, I replied. Start by ordering a full internal audit of any projects involving Redwood, conducted by an independent firm with no ties to either company. When that's complete, we can talk again. I stepped into the elevator, leaving William looking thoughtful in the hallway. As the doors closed, I couldn't help but wonder, was I turning down a legitimate opportunity, or had I just narrowly avoided walking into a trap set by the very people I was now investigating? The SEC investigation moved with surprising speed. 6 weeks after my initial whistleblower report, I sat in a federal building conference room alongside my attorney, watching as Special Agent Diaz laid out the charges being filed against Fairview's former executives. Robert Lang and Thomas Wilson will be charged with securities fraud, filing false financial statements and conspiracy, he explained, based largely on the evidence you provided, Miss Morales. My attorney, Layla Jackson, nodded approvingly. And the board members? 2 board members, including former chair Diana Frost, are being charged with failure to perform fiduciary duties and willful blindness, Agent Diaz continued. The investigation into Redwood Capital is ongoing and complex. I understood the subtext. Redwood had powerful connections and armies of attorneys. That investigation would take much longer and face significant resistance. What happens now? I asked. Now we prepare for depositions and potential trial testimony, Layla explained. And you consider what you want your next steps to be professionally. That question had been weighing on me. I had received no shortage of job offers, but after the Thornmere experience, I was wary of walking into another potentially compromised situation. Agent Diaz slid a business card across the table. When you're ready, there's someone at the Financial Crimes Division who would like to speak with you about a consulting role. Your expertise would be valuable. I took the card, surprised. Working with federal regulators hadn't occurred to me, but it made a certain kind of sense. Who better to help catch financial criminals than someone who had exposed them from the inside? As we left the building, Layla handed me a folder. The final whistleblower award determination came through. The SEC is awarding you 15% of the penalties assessed against Fairview. I opened the folder and nearly stumbled on the steps. The figure was staggering, over $2 million. That's substantial, I managed. Layla smiled. That's what happens when you expose a fraud worth hundreds of millions. Congratulations, Elena. You did the right thing, and for once, it actually paid off. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to feel something close to vindication. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of a corporate ethics conference, surveying the room filled with financial professionals, regulators, and compliance officers. My keynote speech on ethical accounting in the age of pressure had drawn an unexpectedly large audience. The pressure to compromise doesn't arrive all at once, I told them. It begins with small requests, rationalizations, and a culture that prioritizes results over methods. By the time someone asks you to commit outright fraud, you've often already been conditioned to say yes. In the front row sat my team from the newly established consulting firm I had founded 6 months earlier, Integrity Financial Advisory. Using my whistleblower award as seed capital, I had created a practice specializing in forensic accounting and ethical compliance systems. Real integrity isn't just saying no to fraud, I continued. It's creating systems where ethical behavior is rewarded and transparency is the default, not the exception. After the speech, as I mingled with attendees, a familiar face approached. Vanessa, my former assistant from Fairview. That was amazing, she said, hugging me, though I'm a bit biased since I work for the speaker. I smiled. Hiring Vanessa as my firm's operations director had been one of my first decisions. Her loyalty during the Fairview scandal had proven her character beyond doubt. How are the new clients coming along? I asked. We just signed Oakwind Technologies, she replied. That makes 14 clients in 6 months. We're going to need more staff. We'll find them, I assured her. The right people who value integrity over convenience. As we chatted, I noticed Robert Lang's name trending on my phone's news alerts. The headline was succinct. Former Fairview CFO sentenced to 8 years for securities fraud. I felt no joy at his downfall, only a quiet confirmation that the system sometimes worked as it should. Justice, like proper accounting, had finally balanced its books. My revenge hadn't been about destroying careers or seeking personal vindication. It had been about truth, showing that in the world of finance, as in life, integrity is the only currency that never devalues. In the wake of the scandal, I had not only rebuilt my career but transformed it into something more meaningful. While Fairview struggled to recover under new leadership, I was helping other companies avoid similar fates. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but building something better from the ashes of what they took from you.